On his deathbed, Don Isidro, a once powerful haciendero, calls his estranged family together. With his frail voice trembling but his eyes sharp as ever, he confesses a shocking truth. Decades ago, he deceived his siblings, forging documents and stealing the inheritance meant to be shared. Gasps fill the room as the weight of his admission settles, but his final words spark chaos. "I buried what should have been theirs. If you find it, you'll find the truth." A deadly hunt for justice begins. The grand ancestral mansion of Don Isidro was alive with murmurs. News of his unexpected summons brought the scattered branches of his family under one roof. Once commanding, the haciendero now lay frail and sunken in his four-poster bed, surrounded by estranged faces harboring decades of silent grudges. His eldest son, Arturo, strode in first, his suit a testament to his business acumen, yet his eyes betrayed a hunger for more. Clara, the ever-compassionate middle child, arrived next, her delicate frame tense as she anticipated yet another family argument. Then Santiago, the youngest, entered, his estrangement evident in the wary glances exchanged. Alongside them were cousins, nieces, nephews, all bound not by affection but by curiosity and greed. The air grew thick as the room filled. Don Isidro's breath rattled, yet his piercing gaze swept over the gathered crowd. He motioned weakly, and the room fell silent. "I have lived a long life," he began, his voice coarse but steady. "And as I near the end, there is something you must all know." A collective unease settled as his words hung in the air. Arturo crossed his arms. "Father, what's this about?" he asked, impatience cutting through his voice. The old man ignored him, his gaze fixed on the faded portrait of his parents above the mantel. "When my parents passed, they left a fortune, a legacy meant for me and my siblings. But I was young, and I was ambitious. I forged the will, claimed it all, and left my siblings with nothing." His confession landed like a thunderclap. Clara gasped, tears brimming in her eyes. Santiago's face twisted in barely concealed anger. Even the younger relatives, unfamiliar with the family's dark past, were visibly shaken. Don Isidro's breathing grew labored, but he pressed on. "It wasn't just money. I took their lands, their homes, everything. And then I buried the truth, along with a fortune I never deserved." His voice cracked. "What I stole still lies hidden." Arturo stepped forward, his expression cold. "Why now, Father? What's the point of this?" His tone was harsh, but the unspoken question lingered. "Where is it?" A faint smile flickered across Don Isidro's lips. "Because I am dying, Arturo, and guilt is a weight I refuse to carry to my grave. If you find what I buried, you'll uncover the truth, and perhaps justice." The room erupted. Clara tried to calm the younger relatives who whispered feverishly about treasure. Arturo stormed out, fury etched into his features. Santiago remained rooted, his mind reeling as he stared at the frail man who had once been his idol. As the sun dipped behind the sprawling estate, the shadows of Don Isidro's secrets grew longer. His family, bound by blood yet torn by greed, had only just begun their descent into chaos. Outside, the wind howled faintly, as if the mansion itself knew the storm brewing within. The morning after Don Isidro's confession, the mansion teemed with unease. Breakfast was a silent battlefield. Arturo sat at the head of the table, his expression a mask of authority, while Clara nervously stirred her tea. Santiago, as distant as ever, sat at the far end, his posture stiff with defiance. Around them, younger relatives whispered feverishly about buried fortunes and cryptic confessions. Arturo's voice broke the tension. "Enough speculation. If Father left something behind, we'll find it, but only if we stay organized." His tone was calm, but the authority grated on Santiago, who leaned forward sharply. "And who put you in charge?" he shot back. Arturo's expression hardened. "Someone has to be," he replied coolly. "Unlike you, I've been here, keeping this family afloat." Santiago's eyes flashed, but before he could respond, Clara's voice trembled over the rising tension. "Stop it, both of you. We should be working together." Her plea barely dulled the friction, but it was enough to redirect focus. She hesitated before adding, "If we're serious about finding anything, we should start in Father's study." Her suggestion drew murmurs of agreement. The study had always been Don Isidro's domain, a fortress of secrets no one dared disturb. The family shuffled reluctantly down the hall, their footsteps echoing as they reached the heavy oak doors. The air inside the study was oppressive, thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. Arturo wasted no time, moving to the grand desk and rummaging through drawers. Clara, ever cautious, scanned the shelves of books, while Santiago lingered near the windows, his gaze distant. "He always hid things in plain sight," Santiago muttered, his fingers brushing the spines of weathered volumes. It was one of the younger cousins who stumbled upon the first clue. "What's this?" she asked, holding up a yellowed envelope sealed with wax. Arturo snatched it, breaking the seal to reveal a brittle letter. "To those who seek the truth," he read aloud, "you will find it where the shadows linger longest. But be warned, some truths are better left buried." The room fell silent as the weight of the message settled. "What does that mean?" someone asked. Santiago scoffed, his voice sharp. "It means he's playing games, even now." Arturo, however, folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "It's a clue," he said firmly, "and we'll figure it out." The family exchanged wary glances. The discovery of the letter had shifted the atmosphere. This was no longer just a search for justice. It was a competition. Alliances formed in whispers, rivalries reignited in glances. Clara, sensing the brewing storm, tried to mediate, but her efforts were lost in the mounting tension. As they left the study, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the sprawling estate loomed, its gardens and shadows brimming with untold secrets. Somewhere, Don Isidro's buried truth awaited. But as the family dispersed, it became clear. The search would not unite them. It would tear them apart. The mansion seemed quieter than usual, but the silence was deceptive. Beneath its walls, a storm brewed as the family unraveled Don Isidro's cryptic clue, where the shadows linger longest. Arturo stood in his office, staring out at the estate, while Santiago prowled the grounds at night, flashlight in hand. Clara, ever the mediator, pored over family photographs and letters, hoping to find answers. The younger relatives, driven by greed, whispered and schemed in corners, plotting their next moves. The chaos intensified by the third day. Arturo's authority was challenged as cousins were caught digging in the gardens or attempting to break into the cellar. Santiago's resentment simmered until it boiled over when he found Arturo ordering the staff around. "You just want control," Santiago snapped, his voice sharp. Arturo, unflinching, retorted, "Someone has to keep this family together. You wouldn't understand." Before their argument could escalate, Clara interrupted, clutching a tattered diary. "I think I found something," she said, her voice breathless. Both brothers turned to her, their animosity momentarily forgotten. The diary belonged to Don Isidro's mother, Doña Rosalinda. Clara read aloud from a decades-old entry. "The shadows in the eastern grove are the longest at sunset. It is there that Isidro first swore to uphold his father's legacy. But oh, how he has changed since that day." The eastern grove, neglected and overgrown, was a part of the estate long forgotten. Eager to investigate, Arturo and Santiago followed Clara to the grove. The air grew colder as they approached, the trees casting long, eerie shadows. Arturo scanned the ground, while Santiago, impatient, kicked at the dirt. Clara's voice broke the silence. "Look," she called, kneeling by a moss-covered plaque. The rusted plaque read, "In memory of promises kept and broken." The words sent a chill through Clara. "What does it mean?" Santiago asked, his voice uneasy. Arturo knelt beside her, studying the inscription. "It's a grave marker," he said. "But for what?" Nearby, Clara spotted a small, buried leather pouch. Inside was an ornate brass key. "It must unlock something," she whispered, holding it up. Arturo took the key, his grip firm. "We'll find out," he said, already turning back toward the mansion. Santiago's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Clara clutched the diary, her heart pounding with unease. As they walked back, the tension between them thickened. The key had brought them closer to the truth, but it also deepened the fractures within the family. Unbeknownst to them, one of the younger cousins watched from the shadows, their eyes gleaming with a dangerous mix of curiosity and malice. The hunt for Don Isidro's secrets had become a race, and everyone was playing to win. The mansion buzzed with tension as Arturo guarded the brass key, his grip tightening whenever anyone looked his way. Santiago's simmering resentment was impossible to ignore, while Clara tried to keep the peace. Meanwhile, the younger cousins whispered and schemed, their ambitions growing by the hour. Arturo decided the key belonged to Don Isidro's cellar, a place long locked and avoided. "If this fits, we'll know," he said, standing before the heavy wooden door. Clara and Santiago stood behind him, their faces taut. "What if it doesn't?" Santiago muttered. "You'll waste more time chasing shadows." Arturo inserted the key. With a loud click, the lock turned and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A wave of cold, stale air greeted them as they stepped inside. The cellar was larger than they had imagined, its walls lined with shelves of dusty bottles and crates. In the far corner, partially hidden beneath a tarp, was a steel chest. Arturo moved toward it, his pulse quickening. "Wait," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "Shouldn't we—" But Arturo had already pulled the tarp away, revealing the chest's rusted exterior. Its lock had been broken long ago. He hesitated briefly before lifting the lid. Inside was a pile of documents, yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. Clara reached for one, her breath hitching. "It's a deed," she said, "to the sugar plantation in Negros." Santiago pulled out another paper. "This ledger shows payments to Ignacio Santos. That name sounds familiar." Arturo's face darkened. He was grandfather's lawyer, the one who forged the will. These payments must have kept the secret buried. Clara's trembling hands uncovered a brittle letter. "To Ignacio Santos," she read aloud, "the payments will continue as long as my siblings remain in the dark. Burn this letter after reading." The words hung heavy in the cold air. "He paid to cover up everything," Clara whispered. "The land, the money, all of it." Santiago slammed a fist against the wall, his anger barely contained. And he thought burying this would erase his crimes. Arturo's expression remained grim. "This doesn't explain everything. Why would father leave these papers behind if they incriminate him?" Clara hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe he wanted us to find them." Before they could discuss further, footsteps echoed on the stairs. A younger cousin appeared, their eyes wide with curiosity. "What did you find?" they asked, peering toward the chest. "Nothing you need to know," Arturo snapped, slamming the lid shut. "This is between us." The cousin hesitated but retreated, their footsteps fading into the distance. Arturo turned to Clara and Santiago, his voice low. "We need to act fast. If these documents get out, the family will tear itself apart." Clara nodded reluctantly, clutching the letter as if it might vanish. Santiago's face was a mask of fury, but he agreed. As they climbed the stairs, the tension between them was thicker than ever. The documents had answered some questions but raised far more. Outside, the wind howled against the mansion. The chest was only the beginning, and Don Isidro's secrets were far from fully unearthed. The storm brewing within the mansion reached its peak the next day. Word of the chest had spread despite Arturo's efforts to keep it secret. Whispers turned into accusations as the cousins demanded access to the documents. The dining hall, once a symbol of family unity, had become a battleground. Arturo, Clara, and Santiago sat at one end of the table, their unity strained. Across from them, the cousins argued loudly. "This isn't just about you," one shouted. "We deserve to know what's in that chest." Arturo's voice was sharp. "You deserve nothing. Father left this for us to handle." Santiago bristled. "Control, as always. You can't stand not being in charge, can you?" Clara raised her hands. "Stop it, both of you. This isn't solving anything." Another cousin slammed their fist on the table. "You're not the only ones affected by Father's lies. This is our legacy, too." Before anyone could respond, a cousin knocked over a chair, their frustration boiling over. "If you won't share, we'll find it ourselves." They stormed out, followed by others, leaving the room in chaos. Arturo turned to Clara and Santiago. "We need to move the chest before they do something reckless." "Like what?" Santiago asked. "Steal it? Break into the cellar?" "Exactly," Arturo replied. "We have to secure it." Reluctantly, they agreed. That night, under the cover of darkness, the three of them carried the chest to a hidden room behind the library, accessible only with Arturo's key. The tension was palpable as they worked, each aware the cousins might discover them at any moment. The library's shadows seemed to loom larger as they secured the chest. Santiago glanced over his shoulder more than once, his unease clear. Clara's hands trembled as she clutched the brittle documents, her mind racing with questions. Once the chest was locked away, Arturo addressed the others. "This doesn't end here," he said firmly. "The documents are incomplete. We need to find out what Father was hiding." "And how do you propose we do that?" Santiago asked. "The papers don't explain anything." Clara, hesitant but determined, spoke up. "The plantation deed mentioned Negros. If Father stole it, someone there might know the truth, maybe even someone connected to Ignacio Santos." Arturo nodded. "It's a lead. We have to follow it." Santiago folded his arms, his distrust evident. "So we leave the estate and hope the cousins don't find the chest while we're gone." "We don't have a choice," Arturo said. "The answers aren't here." Clara placed a hand on Santiago's arm. "Please, if we uncover the truth, we can stop this before it gets worse." After a tense pause, Santiago relented. "Fine, but if this fails, it's on you." The plan was set. Arturo and Santiago would travel to Negros, leaving Clara behind to monitor the cousins. The mansion, once a haven of opulence, now felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. As night fell, the wind rattled the windows, echoing the storm brewing within. Clara sat alone in the library, her thoughts consumed by the chest and the secrets it contained. Don Isidro's legacy had fractured the family, and the truth seemed further away than ever. The journey to Negros was tense. Arturo and Santiago sat in silence, the weight of their mission heavy between them. As the sugar plantations came into view, their beauty seemed tainted, reminders of the wealth Don Isidro had stolen. The plantation itself was a shadow of its former glory, its gates rusted and its driveway overgrown. The crumbling hacienda loomed ahead, a haunting reminder of a legacy built on betrayal. "This is what he left behind," Arturo muttered as they approached the threshold. "More like what he destroyed," Santiago replied bitterly. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the hacienda was silent, its air thick with decay. Arturo held a flashlight as they moved through the halls, their footsteps echoing eerily. In what appeared to be the study, they found an old desk. Santiago forced a drawer open, revealing a bundle of faded letters tied with twine. Arturo untied the bundle and read aloud. "Ignacio, the deed is done. My siblings suspect nothing. The land is ours, but at what cost? Sometimes I wonder if the price is too great." He paused, the words weighing heavily on him. "Regrets?" Santiago scoffed. "Spare me." Arturo continued reading. "If ever this comes to light, it will be my undoing. The records must be hidden. Burn the rest, as always." He looked up. Ignacio wasn't just father's lawyer. He was his accomplice. The letters revealed a pattern. Ignacio had helped forge documents, bribe officials, and silence anyone who questioned Don Isidro's actions. But one letter stood out, its ink smudged as if written in haste. "Ignacio," Arturo read, "if anything happens to me, the truth will be found where it began. The shadows will reveal all." "The shadows again," Santiago muttered. "What does it mean?" Before Arturo could answer, the crunch of footsteps outside froze them. They crept to the window and saw a figure with a flashlight moving through the garden. It was one of their cousins. "How did they find us?" Santiago hissed. Arturo grabbed the letters. "It doesn't matter. If they're here, Clara couldn't stop them. We need to leave, now." They slipped out through the back of the hacienda, staying low to avoid being seen. The letters in Arturo's bag felt like a ticking time bomb, their contents capable of unraveling the family entirely. Back at the hotel, Santiago paced the room, anger barely contained. "They're not going to stop. Even if we find the truth, this family will rip itself apart." Arturo sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "Then we need to move faster." The letter said, "where it began." What did he mean? Santiago stopped pacing, his brow furrowing. The Eastern Grove back at the estate. That's where everything started for him. Arturo looked up, realization dawning. The shadows were longest there. It has to be the Grove. Their mission had clarity, but the danger loomed larger. If their cousins had followed them this far, what else might they do? The truth lay ahead, but the fight to uncover it had only just begun. Arturo and Santiago returned to the estate at dawn, their faces weary from the journey. Clara met them at the door, her expression grim. "You need to see this," she said quietly, leading them to the dining hall. There, the cousins huddled around a map, their whispers sharp with urgency. "They've been at it all night," Clara whispered. "They're planning to search the entire estate." Arturo stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "What do you think you're doing?" Tomas, one of the more vocal cousins, stood up. "We're finding what you're hiding, Arturo. This isn't just yours to control." "Father left this to us," Arturo replied, his tone icy. "Not to you." "And you expect us to take your word for it?" Thomas shot back. "You've hidden everything. Maybe it's time we take matters into our own hands." Santiago's anger flared. "Stay out of this. You wouldn't know what to do with the truth if it hit you in the face." Clara intervened, her voice strained. "Stop it! This fighting is tearing us apart." But the room was already divided. The cousins exchanged knowing looks, their alliances forming as they turned back to their map. Arturo, Santiago, and Clara retreated to the study, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Arturo placed the letters from Negros on the desk. "The truth is in the Eastern Grove," he said. "That's where we'll find what Father hid." Clara frowned. "If the cousins find out, they'll follow us." "Then we go tonight," Arturo replied firmly. "They won't know until it's too late." As night fell, the three of them made their way to the grove. The air was heavy, and the gnarled trees cast long shadows that seemed to reach for them. Santiago's flashlight cut through the darkness as they searched for anything out of place. It was Clara who found it, a small stone pillar partially buried in the soil. The faint inscription read, "Here lies the burden of betrayal." Arturo knelt beside it, brushing away the dirt. Beneath the pillar was a rusted metal box. Inside, they found papers and a leather-bound journal. Arturo opened it, his hands trembling. "To my children," he read. If you are reading this, my sins have come to light. This journal holds the truth of my actions, and I hope you find justice where I could not. The entries detailed years of deception and regret, but one stood out. I buried the truth here, but it is not the only secret. The shadows stretch farther than you think. What does that mean? Clara whispered. It means this isn't over, Santiago said, his jaw tight. Before they could discuss further, voices echoed through the grove. The cousins had followed them. Arturo stuffed the journal into his bag. We need to go. Now. They hurriedly gathered everything and slipped through the trees, their hearts pounding as the voices grew closer. The grove, once a place of secrets, had become a battleground, and the fight for the truth was far from over. The night was heavy with tension as Arturo, Santiago, and Clara returned to the mansion. The journal and letters were hidden in Arturo's bag, their minds racing with thoughts of the man Thomas had described. Someone who isn't family, Thomas had said. The possibility of an outsider changed everything. Inside the estate, the trio retreated to the study. Arturo locked the door behind them, placing the journal on the desk. We're running out of time, he muttered. Santiago paced, his frustration palpable while Clara sat quietly, her exhaustion clear. They're not going to stop, Santiago said. The cousins, this stranger, none of them will stop until they find what they're looking for. What if the truth makes things worse? Clara asked softly. Father's secret's destroyed enough. Do we really want to open this up? Arturo opened the journal, flipping through its brittle pages. Father left this for a reason. Whatever happens, we need to know the full story. The entries were damning, documenting years of lies and manipulation. Arturo's voice grew quieter as he read, The shadows stretch farther than I ever intended. There are debts unpaid, enemies waiting. If the truth comes to light, it will undo everything. Enemies, Clara whispered. Who could he mean? Someone beyond the family, Santiago said. Someone he crossed. Before Arturo could respond, a knock at the door startled them. Arturo quickly shoved the journal back into his bag. Who is it? He called, his voice steady. Tomas, came the reply. Arturo opened the door reluctantly, and Tomas stepped in, his expression guarded. The others are restless. They think you're hiding something, and they're right. Arturo's jaw tightened. What do you want? Tomas hesitated. Last night, in the grove, I saw someone, a man I didn't recognize. He wasn't family. Arturo exchanged a glance with Santiago. Who was he? I don't know, Tomas admitted, but he was searching, just like us. The room fell silent. An outsider meant the situation was far more dangerous than they'd realized. Arturo made a decision. We have to move the journal. It's not safe here. Where? Clara asked nervously. If they're watching us, they'll follow. Arturo's voice was firm. We'll hide it in the caretaker's cottage. It's forgotten. No one will think to look there. Under the cover of darkness, the trio slipped out of the mansion, the journal secured in Arturo's bag. The wind howled through the trees as they made their way to the dilapidated cottage at the edge of the estate. The building creaked with every step, its air stale and cold. Arturo knelt by a loose floorboard, lifting it to reveal a hollow space. He placed the journal inside, covering it carefully. This will buy us time, he said. But as they turned to leave, a shadow moved outside the window. Santiago grabbed an iron rod, his muscles taut. The door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. His face was unfamiliar, his smile cold. Who are you? Arturo demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping in. The man's eyes flickered to the journal. A friend of your father's, he said calmly, and the one who knows his darkest secret. The air in the caretaker's cottage grew thick as the stranger stepped forward, his shadow stretching across the dim room. Arturo, Santiago, and Clara froze. the weight of his words hanging heavy. "A friend of your father's," he had said, but his cold smile suggested otherwise. Santiago tightened his grip on the iron rod. "You're no friend of ours. What do you want?" The man's gaze flicked to the loose floorboards. Don Isidro owed more than apologies to his siblings. He owed something greater, something I'm here to collect. Arturo stepped forward, his voice calm despite the fear in his chest. "If you know so much about my father, you know we have nothing to do with his debts." The man's smile widened. "But you do. The truth he buried isn't just about inheritance, it's about survival." Clara's voice wavered. "Who are you?" "I'm the man your father betrayed," he said simply, "and the one who can destroy what's left of your family." Santiago lunged forward, but Arturo stopped him. "Not now," Arturo hissed. The stranger's chuckle filled the room. "You can't fight your way out of this. Your father's sins were too great, and now they're yours." "What do you want from us?" Arturo asked, his patience thin. "The journal, and everything tied to Ignacio Santos," the man replied. "Hand it over, and I'll consider letting you walk away." Clara's face paled. "And if we don't?" The man's expression hardened. "Then you'll regret it." Arturo hesitated, then said, "No, we're not giving you anything." The man whistled sharply, and two figures stepped inside, their faces shadowed. "You're outnumbered," he said. "Think carefully." Arturo's mind raced. Fighting wasn't an option. He glanced at Clara and Santiago, their fear evident. "Fine," Arturo said, his voice low. "Take the journal." Santiago's head snapped toward him. "What are you doing?" "We don't have a choice," Arturo said firmly. He retrieved the journal and handed it over. The stranger examined it, his smile returning. "Smart choice," he said. "But if you're hiding anything else, I'll be back." The man and his companions left, the door creaking shut behind them. Santiago slammed the iron rod against the wall. "You just gave it to him. Everything. Gone." Arturo sat heavily, his head in his hands. What choice did we have? He would have killed us. Clara placed a trembling hand on Arturo's shoulder. He took the journal, but not the letters. "We still have those." Arturo's eyes widened. "The letters from Negros. They're the key. If Ignacio Santos was involved, the letters might lead us to someone who can help." "And if they don't?" Santiago asked bitterly. "Then we keep looking," Arturo said. "We owe it to ourselves, and to Father." The siblings left the cottage under cover of darkness, their resolve stronger than ever. The journal was gone, but the fight for the truth wasn't over. As they returned to the estate, they couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger's shadow still lingered, watching their every move. The mansion was eerily silent as Arturo, Santiago, and Clara gathered in the study, the final letters spread out before them. They were running out of time. Arturo scanned the papers, his voice tense. The stranger wasn't lying. This is bigger than inheritance. Father's debt runs deeper than we thought. Santiago scoffed. "We lost the journal. The cousins are ready to riot, and now some outsider is threatening us. How do we fix this?" Clara's voice was soft. "Father didn't just betray his siblings. He betrayed Ignacio Santos too, and it's all catching up to us." Arturo held up one letter, its ink smudged. "Ignacio," he read, "the land is ours, but the debt is not. If we lose it, everything falls apart." He paused. The plantation, it wasn't just stolen, it was collateral. Santiago frowned. Collateral for what? Before Arturo could answer, a crash echoed from the hallway. Heavy footsteps approached. The door burst open, revealing Tomas and two cousins, their faces flushed with anger. "We know you're hiding something," Tomas said. "Where's the journal?" "It's gone," Arturo replied, "taken by someone outside the family." "Liar!" Tomas shouted. "You've kept everything for yourself." Santiago stepped forward, gripping a candlestick. "Back off, Thomas. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "And you do," Thomas shot back. "You've been lying to all of us." Clara raised her hands, her voice trembling. "Stop. Can't you see? Father's lies are tearing us apart. This isn't about who gets what. It's about fixing what he broke." Thomas hesitated, his anger flickering. "If you don't tell us the truth, we'll tear this place apart." Arturo stepped closer, his voice calm. "There's nothing left to tear apart. If we don't stop this, we'll all lose." The tension hung heavy, but Thomas finally backed down, leading the cousins away with a bitter warning. "This isn't over." As the door closed, Arturo exhaled. "We have to end this. Now." Clara unfolded the last letter. "The debt lies buried," she read, "but the shadows will reveal its keeper. Only the truth can set us free." Arturo's eyes lit up. The grove. That's where it ends. The siblings hurried to the eastern grove under the moonlight. The air was heavy as they knelt by the stone pillar, brushing away the dirt. Arturo revealed a hidden compartment at its base. Inside was a lockbox, its edges worn with age. He pried it open, revealing a single deed and a key. Clara's voice trembled as she read the deed. "This land. It belongs to Ignacio Santos." Arturo stared at the document. Father was supposed to return it. This was the payment to settle the debt. "And he didn't," Santiago said bitterly. Arturo stood, gripping the key. "This isn't over. We need to find Ignacio, or whoever's left to claim this. It's the only way to finish what Father started." As they returned to the mansion, the weight of their discovery pressed on them. The truth wasn't just about inheritance, it was about redemption. And, for the first time, the shadows surrounding their family began to lift. But as they prepared for what lay ahead, they knew one thing: the fight for justice was only beginning.